people want to be led. My grandfather always said it back in the day, and I don't know if it's a legitimate quote or not, but he always said, for 1,000 men, there's one leader. Well, you're looking at two leaders sitting in one podcast right now. The success is in what we set. The example is what we set with our higher up team.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today I have a new friend on the podcast. Met this guy last week, and it never ceases to amaze me, the people that are running and building fantastic businesses that I've never heard of. So I am happy that I've heard of him now. We talked last week, and there's a couple of things that I am very curious about in how he does it and what they're building down there in beautiful Southwest Florida. So without further ado, would like to welcome Jesse Rack to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Jesse.
Thanks for having me, Chad. And the way we got introduced to one another was actually a pretty unique story, as I hired an executive assistant, and my Nexstar coach introduced her to your EA, or I think your operations. She's higher up now in the food chain of the company. But yeah, thanks for having me. We're doing some really cool things down here at Rack. We're family owned and operated. And, part of the reason why I joined Nexstar was to meet guys like you, because there are days where I kind of feel alone and I don't know the answers, so when you have the ability to just kind of reach out to someone who's been in your shoes before and is doing the same thing you're doing, just in a different region, as I always like to say, iron sharpens iron. So.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about this industry is everyone is so open and willing to share and, just chop it up and, what's working, what's not. Hey, I tried that at that point in time and it didn't work, or it worked great, or whatever it is. I guess before we get started, maybe it'd be good if you gave kind of the listeners a little bit of your own personal background, as well as kind of the company background. And that way people can put a face with a name and kind of associate, okay, this is what he's talking about. This is what they built. This is where they're going. I think would be a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. My background's always been in sports. I played football and basketball my entire life. And when I got the opportunity to work with my dad down here in South Florida, I took it. And when we were designing everything in the beginning, I'm a big manifester. I like to put things up on the board, goals. And, when I said to my dad, very simply, look, I'm not coming to be an electrician. I'm coming to build a brand. I'm coming to create an empire. And what we've done in the 12 years has been really incredible. Obviously, time flies when you're having fun and you're working your ass off, but it's had its challenges as well. So, when I started with my dad 12 years ago, it was, one truck, several employees. And here we are 12 years later with 5 different locations, over 110 trucks on the road, 200 plus employees. And we actually work in several different states down here in the Southeast US. We're a unique company because we started in electrical, and, electrical's tough. I mean, unless you're really living and dying in the home residential world, or you're doing, commercial, it's hard to kind of do both, because you get such an environment where guys only want to work on commercial and or residential. So we started really in the commercial world. My dad did new construction. I looked at the business model. I looked at the numbers, and I was like, this is good, but there's just not enough profit margins, so what can we do better? So I started to really massage his relationships and the clients that he currently had, and offered them things that they weren't getting, like free night inspections or free evaluations of properties that they were buying, or as I'd like to call them, electrical safety assessments. And I would give them, my time that would ultimately that would turn into jobs, because their job was to decrease the liability, and then they just kind of spun, got into generators, got into EV chargers. Now we're in propane and natural gas, solar, HVAC. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, a lot of as we talked earlier, and my dad started the company back in '86. I joined in 2011. My brother in 13, and that was after a few years under our belt. Was kind of like, okay, what do we want to build? We've got this opportunity that we've been afforded now. How are we going to go make our mark? And so I think that's really interesting. I guess there's probably a lot of family-owned businesses that listen. What was that like with your dad when you came down? I mean, it sounds like you were pretty clear on, hey, I'm coming down to do this, not just to do exactly what we've been doing. And kind of how has that evolved for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved so much. So uniquely, I came to South Florida to coach football, and my background has been, playing football from high school to college. The NFL didn't work out, and I'm not one of those guys that just keeps, if it doesn't work, I go a different direction. So I wanted to coach football. I was really passionate about it, and my dad had gotten sick, and now that I look back at it, when he first got sick, it probably was anxiety or something. Like you start to kind of know a little bit more about who your parents are when you start to work with them. And he had been through 2 recessions at that time, and obviously different things changed between '01 and '08. This was around the 2013 area. And I sat down with him and I was like, first he said, look, you're 25 years old, you need to pick a career, which I agree. There's a lot of job jumpers out there, and if they just stuck to their first opportunity, they may really hit pay dirt. So I said, okay. So I started putting everything on paper and evaluating everything, and being of that mindset of, okay, I know how to do marketing because I learned that in college, and I learned it with coaching football. Because as you're recruiting different recruits, you're doing different creative things to get them excited about the program. So I started to take that aspect to rack, and I started first with the logos, started with the wrap trucks. When we had one truck wrap, people thought we had 25 trucks wrapped, and then it was Facebook or at the time Twitter, and we would post different things, and people just really bought into it because it's authentic. Like what we get to do every day is cool. It's not tech. Like we're dealing with big machinery, and we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with badass tools from Milwaukee who we work with, and like these are things that people wish they could deal with every day. So it just really evolved quick, especially because, like you said, your dad gave you a good opportunity. My dad gave me a great foundation, and I'm jealous you had a brother to bounce ideas off of. I didn't have that. So he'd bounce it off with me and my dad. And you're talking about 2 different time periods, a time period that's probably your father and my father are very similar, where, they dot every I and they cross every T, but it's very hard to expand like that, So we would evaluate things that he was really good at, what I was really good at, and I would focus on the new sales. I would focus on the new clients. I got us involved with Generac, who we've grown with over the last 7 years to be the #1 independent Generac dealership in the Southeast. We stopped installing other brands. We'll service them because, money's still money, and we want to make sure that clients, we're keeping and retaining clients, but we really only install Generac. And that's really been good to us. It's just kind of keeping it simple, stupid, as they like to say, for not only the top management, but all the way down to the lowest level person. If you can create that consistency, you create, better processes and better procedures.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna dive in even a little bit further on this father-son relation, and just know the reason I do is because I'm curious, based on kind of how ours went. So if I know I've never met your dad, but I'm gonna guess that a little bit of a like control freak is the wrong word, but they're somewhat reluctant to give up trust to others. It's more of a, hey, I'm gonna control this, and I know best, and these are the things that I want to do. I'm thinking I'm right by you shaking your head. So how did you, and you made the comment, in order to scale, I've got to trust other people. I can only do so much work in a day's time, and I'm going to have, not just one crew do it. I'm going to have 8 and 10 and 12, and it just keeps growing as you scale. What's been your strategy coming into a business that's already established? There's certain kind of rules of the road in any business that you enter. So like, what did that look like? And I guess maybe how does it look today as you've kind of made it comfortable to scale? I know the word scaling a business was never in my dad's vocabulary and never will be. That's not what he wanted to do. And not that it's right or wrong or whatever, it's just a different approach. How have you kind of navigated that with him? And then, obviously scaling the company like you have.
Well, it starts with a really strong team, and you're 100% correct. My dad tends to want to have his hands on everything, and it really eliminates the ability to grow. Sometimes, unfortunately, and even myself, and I'm sure it's the same for you, you got to let people make mistakes. But then as you are controlling those issues and you're teaching them, are they learning from those mistakes, and those mistakes aren't happening again, right? Nobody's perfect. As my business coach once said, it comes down to two really big factors. It's communication and people. And sometimes they're a little hard to control. You can have every system in place, but everybody's unique, right? So allowing someone to make a mistake and learning from it and then coaching them up on that. And, when I got involved, it always seemed like the trades were looked down on. So I wanted to kind of figure out a way to make people look impressed by the trades. First impression is everything. Are the uniforms right? Are the trucks right? Because that to me is so important. And it's such an overlooked statistic that people don't deal with, right? So it started with the rebrand of everything. And that was from John J. Racking to Rack Electric. At this point, we really go by just Rack because of all the different divisions that we have and the services that we offer. And, it took time. And one of my greatest strengths, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is I see and recruit people differently. We recruit on attitude, not so much on skill. There's a lot of bad habits in this industry. I was fortunate enough to graduate from college, not to sit there and say that that's a game changer, but it was structure for me. Playing football, being on that team mentality, having to understand a playbook. That was kind of my teachings, and then getting everybody on the team to kind of accept their role and responsibility. And in the beginning, everybody was like a Swiss Army knife, like wherever we could jump in. Obviously, as we've grown and grown that C-level team and grown into all these different departments, and we're still, hey, that's not your role and responsibility anymore. We're still constantly coaching. And I tell my team all the time, I want to win, but I want you guys to win just as bad as I do, and this is probably why I push you. This is the part of our success. And for the most part, we are winning. We're just like every other company. You always have your issues, but we really try to control how great the customer experience is. We really try to eliminate any problems within the culture. The culture is very strong. And it just takes time. It takes time. And my dad had cancer in 2017, and that kind of changed the trajectory of the business a little bit, because I stepped up and I said, hey, I got this. Like, you're good. Focus on that. And that was a tough time, but it's that old saying, tough times don't last. Tough people do. And I was working 7 days a week, to be creative. Where can I find, who can we work for? Can I run a service call? Can we run an emergency service? Can I get extra jobs done? And it all worked out, and then obviously with COVID and all that other stuff, the business itself has just evolved because we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. And that may just be what motivates me the most, is that from learning that from football, we were always coached to embrace being uncomfortable, because as soon as comfort, everything feels all warm and fuzzy, I think something's off, and that's one of the hardest habits I've had to break, but it's also who I am, so.
I love all the football. And where'd you play at?
I played at the University of Buffalo, and uniquely, as I would always give, I was on the first flight out of there because it was very cold, very gray. I was on the first flight out down to Florida, and but one thing that Buffalo taught me was there's beauty in the hard work, because when I went to Buffalo, or my 2005 class went to Buffalo, we wanted to win. We really wanted to win bad, and it becomes contagious. And when we turned around 3 years later, and we won the 2008 Mid-American Conference, that to me is like a defining moment in my life and my career. It's kind of the same way I approach every single day at Rack. Winning's contagious. We got to do it all together as a team.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. I think whenever we're struggling, it goes back to what you said. It's communication and people. And I think sometimes when people are struggling, or you've got a technician in a rut, like what's going on, man? It could be a myriad of things, but I've always found that really well is showing them how to win. So if you're a manager and you have someone on your team that's not winning, how can you show them how to win? Maybe it's jumping in the truck with them. Maybe it's, just sitting down and saying, hey, man, like, what's going on? And maybe it's a personal issue or something that you can't necessarily help them through. But I think letting people know as a leader that you're on their side and, I'm going to do everything in my power. I may not be able to solve your personal issue, but I can let you know that I'm here for you. And if you need someone to talk to, hey, let's go get some wins on the board out here because, maybe it'll take our mind off of whatever's happening in life for, just a few hours, which is sometimes, what everybody needs for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all human, even when there's a mistake or something in the field and a customer's really upset, we try to go back. Obviously, customer experience is so important, and we reverse engineer it. And then, at the end we say, we're sorry. We're human, we make mistakes, but judge us by how we resolve this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we were talking on the phone, and we're going to kind of maybe shift gears a little bit to kind of some of the tactical stuff because I know that, it seems like the new in vogue thing right now is how do I sell generators? Like, what is this thing? It's an opportunity. A lot of people have been focused on HVAC and plumbing and electrical. And I feel like sometimes, especially for me, it's electrical and plumbing. Plumbing, it's the water quality aspect that no one focuses on. And it's that generator aspect that I think not that people don't focus on it. I don't know that they know how. And you made a comment when we were on the phone. You go, because you guys are just you're bringing on HVAC. It's newer, and you said there's some distinct differences between selling a generator and selling an HVAC system. Dive into those for me because I feel like when I first thought about it, I was like, oh, this is just like selling a piece of HVAC equipment.
Yeah, I mean, the generator industry is a very unique industry. There's a lot of fascination with it right now. Being in South Florida, the hurricane capital of the world, I've seen the firsthand, wave of it. Started in 2017 as a nobody. Here we are in 2025 as, what I believe the number one on the East Coast of Florida. We have a very, very big territory and a large customer base. And, what it comes down to is understanding that with generators, you're not just dealing with one discipline, you're dealing with multiple disciplines. Essentially, you're a general contractor. I learned the hard way in 2019, which is when Rack Energy, our natural gas and propane division, was born because I had to deal with subcontractors doing all my gas work. And it was just not a good customer experience, putting me very liable. And we decided to start it, and we invested into it wholeheartedly and made sure that we offered that whole turnkey process. Uniquely, I'm the qualifier for both electrical and gas, so I understand both of it. But we have people on our team that are also qualifiers. We're really, really keen on that so that they understand that side is so important because a generator can't run without gas, and we're not installing diesel generators all over the place. We're not in the middle of nowhere. We're in cities, we're in metropolises. So, you're relying on natural gas, understanding the pressure in the systems, the water column. And then on the other side, you're installing propane tanks where, you're making sure your distances are correct from the property lines. Every single HOA is different, but generators have just kind of taken on a life of itself. When I got in, it was the right time. Timing's everything. I'm sure it's the same for you with different things. We were at the point where Generac seemed to really have figured out their air-cooled units. We believe, 8 out of 10 sold jobs down here are air-cooled, and we were doing a ton of swap outs. So what we did was we took, your normal everyday electricians and we turned them into generator installers. And these guys were used to, making sure they were up on the code. Every Monday we'd have code meetings, and it just kind of evolved. Year one was 6 generators. Year 2 was 116 because of a hurricane scare. And that was a combination of good marketing. Year 3, so on and so forth. This year our goal is to do 1,200 units. And we just have it really dialed in, kind of probably how you have it dialed in for HVAC. It's a unique sale because you're selling a peace of mind in a location that hurricanes are prevalent. It's no longer a seasonal thing. It's a year-round thing. Obviously, with everything going on in the electrical or industrial industry with all the different resources. You're seeing a stress on our grid, which is why we think generators are such a great piece of equipment to have, especially when you love your family at home, but then you also have a business to operate as well. If you don't have power, you can't operate. So we're seeing a real adoption to it, and obviously COVID was a big help with a lot of the relocates that came down from all over the country to move to Florida. And, this hurricane season is going to be an interesting year. I just finished an event last week where, there's 16 to 20 named storms, and they believe we're going to get 4 to 6 major storms, so being prepared. People always say, man, I wish I had that generator. This thing is a 52-week a year appliance that's going to take care of your house. Because just last week I was home with my wife and 2 boys, and I slept in for the first time on a Saturday and woke up and I said, what is that? I opened the patio door and the generator was running. I don't know why we didn't have I don't know why we didn't have power. And I checked with my neighbors and they were sitting in the dark, we invited them over. You want to come out and hang out in the air condition? So my fascination with generators has led me to HVAC because we've seen so much of it in the private equity and venture capital world where, HVAC companies are down getting involved with generator companies. They're not having a lot of success with it. I guess it all depends how much you measure your success, but I'm reverse engineering in it and I've got generators dialed in. I think we have it dialed in better than anybody in the country. And now I'm going to dial in HVAC.
What are you seeing as, like you said, heard a ton of people. I mean, we're one of them, hey, how do we get in this generator business type thing? What are some of the differences you're seeing, or like, how are you approaching maybe HVAC in a different fashion based on what you know about generators? Like as you build up your HVAC department, what are the differences that you're seeing that people should be aware of? Like, hey, it's not exactly the same. It's a little bit different. And these are the nuances.
Yeah. Just like everything, right? I don't like to copy people, but I do know how to create my own roadmap through other success. And so, we'll gather a bunch of research and data and kind of come up with our own and sit down as an executive team and come up with these ideas. What we felt is that we have such a large customer base with just generators. Why would they not trust us with taking care of their air conditioners? We're there one time, if we can teach different techniques to our technicians, we can eliminate another trip out there. And then also offering a lot of these really cool remote monitoring which is what we're huge on. With the integration of AI and technology, we're constantly testing it. Sometimes we have to apologize to customers because they'll get hit with like 17 text messages, but we're all human, we're testing it out. It's the only way to correct it. So, on the gen side, the really hard part again comes down to sizing the generator correctly, in different areas. The one thing I think about HVAC is that it's pretty standard across the board when it comes to, and I could be totally wrong, but it's pretty standard with the units and the sizes. But in your areas, you guys have furnaces. We don't have furnaces. We have heaters, which most of the time the units down here are not sold with heaters. So a lot of our generators are sized based on the demand load of the air conditioning system, which is the priority of why everybody's getting it. And so we're learning a lot that with the generators, the disciplines in South Florida have taken it to a level that it's almost like a major construction. And if you don't have this thorough background on understanding, zoning and understanding the fire, you're setting yourself up for disaster. So, you take somebody that hasn't done it. I've done it firsthand since 17. I was out there setting generators back in 18 with Irma or 17 with Irma, you're seeing a different aspect of it on our side. And some of the downfalls that we see on HVAC similarly are technicians. They seem to be job jumpers. They'll be with us for a week or two and they're jumping to the next guy for $1, or they're jumping for the next opportunity. And, one thing that I've always prided myself on was not to do the industry standard. I think the industry standard, I'm sure you're the same way. It gets pretty played out. If we all do the industry standard, what's going to set us apart from one another? So uniquely, our ability to have conversations that are thorough and honest because we're in different areas. We're not direct competitors. But one thing I did do before a lot of private equity and venture capitalism bought the local businesses, I used to have a really good builder alliance with everybody, where we would just basically If we needed a part or we needed this or we needed that, there was always plenty of work for everybody. But one thing we didn't play was this technician stealing game, where we would offer their technician more money. Because once you start to change that dynamic, you start to have a lot of issues going forward. And that really worked out well for us. The landscape's changed over the last 2 years, where us being the independent and the family owned and operated, a lot more people are gravitating to us because they don't really enjoy that corporate style. They like to be able to talk to someone that actually knows about electric, versus somebody that graduated with a degree and is a general manager for somewhere. You know what I mean? So we've had a lot of success with that.
That's awesome. Obviously your ability to scale, I think, and maybe it's just because we're newer at it, but, electricians seem to be hard to find. They're either in a commercial setting, and that's what I think you alluded this at the beginning. They're in a commercial setting and that's all they want to do is commercial electric. And most of our competition on the electrical side is very small mom and pop. Maybe they got an electrician or two, but there's no, they're just plainly hard to find. How have you been able to scale and add electricians? Is it internal training? Is it what's kind of your recipe for being able to build up your workforce?
Yeah, it's been a combination of things. We have an in-house recruiter here. I think that's really important. I think some people miss that. We have a person, that's all they do, and every week they're going around to each manager and, hey, what are your needs? They're reviewing the roster. Again, I bring it back to running it like a team. They're having their huddles. So we're constantly staying ahead of that curve, and then offering the opportunity to guys that come in with good attitudes that, hey, we're going to build the foundation of your career, but you're going to have to start on level 1. And then we're going to put you in school, and then you're going to get on the job training. That's unreal because we're the industry leaders, so having those managers spend extra time with them every week. On the skilled side, it's always tough. It's been tough since I started this 12 years ago. And I said this to my dad the other day. I said, you gave me a pretty good crew when I took over, and I'm proud to see several of those guys have gone off and started their own business. I don't think there's ever enough opportunity for those guys in this industry. And that's always been part of my goal, to have more opportunity where, you see it, you see guys that just get stuck in the field the rest of their lives. And not to say that it's not a good opportunity for them, but everyone deserves a chance to excel in their career. So with the skilled guys, we offer them that, if they're younger or they're open to wanting to learn that management style, we'll thrust them into the position, utilizing some of the coaching learnings that we get from Nexstar, setting them for trainings, having in-house trainings. You start to kind of identify people who have the capacity to learn. Then you got to kind of ID, okay, well, do they want to do this job? Do they want to talk to customers? Do they have the willpower to show up every single day and do this job? So we always judge our managers and our secondary people on 3 things: want, will, and capacity. And all 3 are very hard to find, but all of our managers have all 3, levels. Obviously there's always different levels to everything, but we keep working on those. So we've had a lot of success with just offering these things to guys where other companies aren't, where they're just going to be turning a screwdriver or hanging a switch the rest of their life. Some guys are okay with that. Most people aren't.
Yeah, I think that's a great point is, how are you going to set yourself apart? And you've said it multiple times, which I think is spot on, is, any electrician, any plumber, any HVAC tech, they can go down the street for $4 or $5 more an hour all day, every day. But what kind of culture are you going to create within your company? What kind of opportunities are you going to provide to your people so that, yeah, I'm here and yeah, I could go make a couple extra dollars, but when I'm looking at the long game, this place is going to provide me a heck of a lot more opportunity to, make more money, advance my career, take on different responsibilities, so on and so forth. And I think that that's a powerful thing that a lot of people miss. I feel like in the trades, it's just a lot of complaining that, well, I can't find any people and, oh, they could go somewhere else and all of this stuff. And it's like, complaining is going to get us nowhere. I take it back to football. It's either you can complain that you're not playing, or you can go out there and work harder and earn a spot on the team. Pretty simple That's something I learned through football as well. Is your destiny is really in your control. So how hard are you willing to work? What are all the things that you're willing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I learned that at a young age in college. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And the toughest part to bring to the trades was building that adversity or building that accountability as well. Because in football, if you don't do good or you screw up, you and your group have to pay the penalty for it. But we did that here, and we did that with the culture where guys would start to hold other guys accountable, like, hey man, Chad, on time is late, early's on time. And if your truck needs to be parked in your spot, park your truck in your spot. If you don't have 3/4 of a tank on the weekend, whose fault is that? These are all things that we're constantly training. And I had once a manager call it babysitting. Well, that manager's not with us anymore. Okay. It's coaching 101. And not every person is the same. You have to understand the different personalities, different stuff that's going on in their own personal life, like you said earlier. But if you can maintain those standards and you can keep pushing when somebody needs to be pushed, everybody has a limit, and it's not in a disrespectful way. It's about being professional. I think it goes back to probably for you, fear versus respect growing up. And someone asked me something and I said, well, I always feared my parents, but I more or less respected my parents. So I never wanted to embarrass them, and we try to create that same concept here. I don't want people to fear me. I want my competitors to fear me. But I want my people to respect me and understand that, I don't lead from the back, I lead from the front. So if I'm going to talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk. If I'm going to have that meeting at 10 o'clock, I'm the first one in there because I'm leading by example. And the same thing goes down to the managers, to the assistant project managers, to the dispatchers, the CSRs, and then the field techs. And the same hierarchy goes out there. People want to be led. My grandfather always said it back in the day, and I don't know if it's a legitimate quote or not. But he always said, for 1,000 men, there's one leader. Well, you're looking at 2 leaders sitting in one podcast right now, right? So the success is in what we set. The example is what we set with our higher up team.
Absolutely. Well, and I always say too, when we talk about leadership around here and, what needs to be done and, how do I become a leader? I don't have those skills. Maybe I was an individual contributor. And my advice is always the leader will emerge when everybody understands that they care as much about your success as they do their own. When you can demonstrate that to others, they naturally will follow, because I think it goes back to you talking about your dad, your parents, and your grandfather, is that we're all, I think, wired to those people that care about us genuinely. We don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to let them down. We don't want to embarrass them. And how you create that type of culture within your company, I think, is indicative of your success and your ability to build a team. And, we've talked about football a lot. I could talk about it all on a podcast. To me, the trades and what we do is the closest thing I can find to a football field, because in football, I've got a quarterback and then I've also got an offensive tackle. They do 2 completely different things, but if they each don't do their job, the team is unsuccessful. And to me, I look at that as, anyone from a CSR to the technician to the manager to the accounting department to the marketing department. If everybody's not on the same page, if everybody's not doing their job, if one discipline fails, well, the whole thing can break down. And to me, that's what I find so exciting about what it is that we do. It's how do you connect all of these dots? How do we have our marketing portray a message, and the CSR reemphasizes that, and the dispatcher, and then the technician, and then the installers, and so on and so forth, to where you create this seamless chain of providing great customer service. Much like in football, if everybody does their job and everybody does it really well, we win the game. We get the outcome that we want.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. We had a meeting last week with the managers, and one of the things that I said to them was, comes from Michael Jordan, who to me is the greatest of all time. The ultimate winner, undefeated in the NBA Finals, 6 rings. And the truth is that as bad as I want to win, I want my team to win too. I don't want that CSR to come here in 2022 and in 2025 still be a CSR. I'm hoping that CSR at some point had moved up to be a dispatcher or maybe they're an assistant project manager, or maybe they're somewhere, in permitting. That's the thing. Every single day you've got to get better. And I think it starts with leadership. It started with my father. And if you've heard me speak before, you've read anything I've put out there, he gave me an extremely strong foundation. And my goal was to build a skyscraper. And, on your side and my side, and, it's always measuring risk versus reward and not being afraid to, step outside the box and do an acquisition when you've never done an acquisition before. And then all of a sudden you start to become obsessed. You want to know everything about them. You start running all these different metrics and you realize like, oh my goodness, look how much faster we can grow. Take a step back 2 years later, look at all the issues that come up with them too. How can we develop systems and processes now that if we do an acquisition, those are gone, because you see it all over the place. Acquisitions are happening daily, some good, some bad, some indifferent, but it's kind of like somebody introduced to me today, the boomers, I forget what it's exactly called, and I can get the terminology, but they're going to be retiring at a record pace, and all these trade businesses, where are they going to go to? And that was always my goal for my dad. I think back, what if I don't step in to help my dad 10 years ago? I know that I would have been successful because I'm driven, but would he be just like them? And I'm super happy and grateful to have put us in this type of position where people always kind of maybe look down at the trades. And now they're looking at us like, well, shoot, we can't do that without them. Like, I can't fix this generator. I can't fix this electrical thing. EV chargers, that's a huge industry right now. And the only thing I regret about HVAC is I didn't start it sooner, because I'm enamored by how our brand is holding up against others when we're saying, hey, we've never done HVAC before, but we started a division and we want you to be our customer. And we've had some ambassadors for us in the community that say, hey, Rack's always done right by me. And it's been really dynamic.
That's awesome. Well, Jesse, I know we're kind of running up against time here. I want to be respectful of that. I really appreciate you sharing kind of your lessons. There's a lot of things that I think we're aligned on with as it relates to leadership, scaling a company, and then obviously, kind of that transition from one generation to the next. I think that we've navigated it in a very similar fashion. And I think that we're also both very grateful for what our parents kind of set up for us. And not that we were given anything, but, that foundation has led us build something really, really cool in each of our respects. And, I always tell my dad as he sometimes like, all these people running around, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, if you think about it like that, yeah, you could get frustrated. But if you also think about it as all the hard work that you put in over the years also allows 400 plus people to receive a paycheck this Friday. That's pretty impactful in what you've been able to do. And it doesn't matter, at what step of the process you contributed. And that goes for everybody here, is that everybody plays a role and everybody is helping move this thing forward, because at the end, we all win. And when we win, our customers win.
Yeah, it's the most important part.
Yeah, such a great message and such just really, really great advice for anyone listening as to, okay, what are the things you need to be thinking about to scale a company? And I think it all, as I'm sure you would agree, all comes back to leadership and how uncomfortable are you willing to get to give trust, to support people, to lift them up in order to create something really, really special. So really appreciate the time, man. Look forward to getting to know you more. I'm definitely going to be stopping by when I'm down in your neck of the woods. It makes it a little easier trip when I can go down to Florida. It's a good excuse. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. And, I appreciate getting introduced to you. And, I have a lot of questions to ask you, vice versa. What I think both of us are doing is really special, especially because I think the trades, deserve to have great contractors in it, and that it's not just always about the dollars and cents. It is about the people, and having the ability to provide for all those people is my greatest gift back, to this world. And, seeing the people grow and then providing that service, at the end of the day, we're in the customer service world. And what I always tell people is we have 200 plus people that work here that truly care. And when you have an impact like that, you can make an impact on the community, which is why we've seen so much success here with Rack. I just feel like we're just getting started. That's what I'm most excited about. And I'm in year 12. Appreciate you having me. I'm sure we'll be on a future one. We can share more nitty gritty details, but thanks for having me, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG arena. As always, keep growing out there.